So I've always had mentors around me. I've always sought people out who can help me build what I want to build, who have more experience in doing that. Also partly because I never had a business degree. I never did an MBA or went to an Ivy League school or anything, right? So I kind of figured I need some people who can coach me. And so I have always had it, which was really helpful. But there were probably more like one was a telco guy or one was an advertising guy, right? So that they would be able to help me with one subject matter. And of course, there was lots of learnings along the way on people management and P&L management and general sort of business learnings. But this whole like keeping your ears to the ground, if you're a smart guy, you can always justify, post-rationalize your decisions and why that made sense. And that becomes too easy, especially if you're very attached to something.
That's why it's so important to have mentors and coaches that come from a place of love. Like they care about you as an individual and they're looking out for your best interests, but they're willing to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
Welcome to the Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. This is Phil Michaels, Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur and performance coach. Every year, Forbes names the top 30 entrepreneurs, leaders, and stars in the world. And each week, I bring you one of them to help you level up in your life and business. From celebrities like LeBron James to Kylie Jenner and Cardi B, to entrepreneurs with companies like DoorDash, Instagram, and YouTube, you're sure to learn from the list. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now it's time to level up. Level up.
Welcome to Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. Today we have a very special guest. He made the Forbes Asia list in 2018 for the advertising and media category. He's a digital media entrepreneur, currently the CEO of iVideoSmart called IVS. It's Southeast Asia's largest B2B video publishing and monetization platform. It's like YouTube for business. They allow businesses to monetize their video content more effectively. IVS reaches over 120 million unique browsers on over 1.3 billion pages each month. And he's calling all the way in from Singapore. Please welcome my very special guest, Milan.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Very excited to have you here. It's an honor. It's my pleasure. Welcome to the show. Before we jump into things, where were you when you found out you made the Forbes list?
I don't actually remember. I just remember seeing the email and I was like, what? It was a strange experience because we had a PR agency in London with my previous company. And they asked me at some stage, we want to sign you up to this Forbes 30 Under 30 thing. And I was like, what? I mean, I think it sounds like a waste of time. Why me? And they said like, no, I mean, we could give it a shot. It's kind of cool what you guys are doing. And then I just forgot about it. It just seemed like a long shot thing, and I didn't put much effort in it. They asked me to edit some bits and pieces that they had written. And then like 2 months later, I got an email saying you were Forbes 30 Under 30. And so I think I stopped working and had a drink at that point, probably.
What an amazing accomplishment and definitely a time to celebrate. Who was the first person you shared it with?
Whoever would have sat next to me at that point in time, I assume. I'm not sure. Also.
And so you made the Forbes list for one company and you've now transitioned and you were in Germany at the time. You're originally from Germany. So take us back to the very beginning because now you're with a new company, you're in a new location. Take us back to the very beginning, where you're from, where you grew up, and the path that led you to where you are today, ultimately making the Forbes list and being the CEO of your new company.
Yeah, okay. So the quick version, I'm German originally, as you mentioned. I'm from Munich, south of Munich. And I grew up there and my parents are sort of left-wing, if I heard a good word, champagne liberals, like sort of, sophisticated hippies. And the south of Germany is very conservative. So it's very right-wing generally. And I had a very strange upbringing compared to my peers. I could sort of do whatever I want. I had no, don't hurt people, things like that, right? We had some good rules, but generally I didn't have much rules. And then when I went to high school, I really didn't feel at home there because I was very different or my way of thinking was very different to my peers and the people in class. And my dad sent me, on the other hand, my dad's a scientist, a professor and a rocket scientist, works for the German Space Center, and very sharp man. And when he saw me sort of failing at English, ironically, in high school, he told me I should go to an English-speaking country for a student exchange when I was 15. And just, purely by looking at a map, I chose New Zealand and went to New Zealand, and then kind of never returned. So I've lived in New Zealand for 12 years before I came here to Singapore 3 years ago, purely because of the student exchange thing. And in New Zealand, I really felt like I fit in, because the people are generally very liberal. So the right wing of New Zealand is probably more like the left wing of Germany, if you know what I mean. And then it just goes more left, and so they're very non-classist, reasonably non-racist country, comparatively, I think, to a lot of other places in the world. And so you see an investment banker and a construction worker hanging out at the pub, arguing about politics, and just before you think this might end up being a brawl, they'll say cheers and agree to disagree, which is for me so cool, Like I love that. I love that environment, and so that was what made me decide to stay there.
It seems very dichotomous from where you grew up to, where you spend your more adult life or teenage life.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's still a developed Western country, so there's that comfort. But totally, definitely different culturally. And then I studied design. My mom's an artist, my dad's a scientist. Design to me seemed like, scientific creativity, and really not knowing that I was going to be an entrepreneur at all yet. I just sort of, still figuring out what to do with myself. And I was good at design because I'm naturally a creative person. So I excelled, and then got a job at Saatchi & Saatchi straight after uni in Wellington. But even before that, at uni, I was making quite a bit of cash with flipping things. So my dad didn't give me very much money because he wanted me to come back to New Zealand, back to Germany. So I had to work in cafes and stuff when I was 16, 17. But then I started to flip, basically buy stuff cheap on Trade Me, which is sort of like an eBay. So I buy stuff cheap and then sell it for more. And I made quite a bit of money. At some stage, probably got to 6-digit cash in my bank account when I was still under 20. And then started working advertising and sort of realized, shit, I'm making 40, 50K a year. And I'm working my ass off, working long days in an agency. And realized I was making more money in uni flipping laptops and cars. I was selling secondhand cars and other things. And I sort of realized probably I'm kind of perhaps made to be an entrepreneur, to do stuff myself. And that's when I then slowly started to look at app tech-based businesses and started a company. And I liked advertising and I liked apps because I was working on some UX type work on apps for larger companies in an agency. And eventually came across this model. So I did one business which was like a sort of like BlaBlaCar, like a ride sharing platform, sort of like Lyft,
like Uber or Lyft.
But more for commuting, more for intercity commuting or daily commuting. Mm-hmm. So peer to peer rather than ride hailing as a service. But it didn't really work. So we got to something like 50 to 100 rides a month, and the margin was less than $1 per ride. So we realized this isn't gonna actually be a business here. So dropped out of that and then started a business called Poster, Postr, which essentially put advertising on your Android lock screen, and if you accept it, you get some points or cash. That initial model also didn't really work, and then one day over a beer with a guy who's like an early stage investor, an angel investor, who later then joined me as chief operating officer, and we were working together for a long time, Roger Shakes, and he had this idea, it's like, what if you give people data, like mobile data? And I know in the States it's kind of commoditized, right? You get these huge plans quite cheap. A lot of parts of the world you still pay, decent money for like 2 gigabytes a month or something. And in New Zealand it was like that at that point in time. And we did our first deal with a telco where essentially you download this white labeled app, which is called, let's say, like Sprint Plus, for example, but with a New Zealand telco, and you'd get 500 megabytes a month for free if you accepted advertising on your lock screen. And that worked extremely well. So we had like something like, I think 60% 30-day retention. So for those people who know apps, that's very good. So meaning basically 60% of people who download your app are still using it after 1 month. If you think about
you're giving them instant gratification. You're incentivizing them. Hey, if you're willing to look at this advertisement on our lock screen on our phone, hey, we'll give you some extra mobile data, which maybe to those in the US where we have post-paid plans where you just pay a monthly subscription, you get unlimited everything. In most developing nations, and I work directly with telcos, so I understand this value of mobile data. And so you were saying, hey, we'll give you a bundle or a pack of extra mobile data just for looking at this advertisement. And the telco's like, hey, this is a good idea. We'll let you on our platform.
Exactly. I mean, for them, it's a utilization of an underutilized asset generally, right? I mean, they don't have to build new towers for giving some free data away.
An existing distribution channel.
Exactly. I mean, on the other hand, as a startup working with telcos, as you might know yourself, is not always tricky. They're large, complex organizations.
They will eat you alive if you don't make sure you work that contract properly.
Yeah. Exactly.
They are like, I've learned that telcos are the Apple, Google, and Facebook of developing nations. They run things in the tech world.
Yeah. In Africa, especially, some interest. Safaricom is amazing, right? What they've done with
M-Pesa and mobile money.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah.
So that's what we did for my ed tech company, Tembo. So we educate children around the world. We started in Nigeria, and we reward the parent for educating their child with mobile data for their phone. And so it's a form of currency there. I mean, they will text you money directly to your phone. It was like Venmo before Venmo.
Right.
It's and it was just through a text. So they were ahead of their time. I guess that's why they had that gap in that. They just jumped the tech gap. They went straight from no phones to mobile money. What happened with the company, and how did you transition out of that?
Basically, we started to grow that telco business quite a bit, and we got a deal in Indonesia with Telkomsel, which is it's a large telco. They have something like 170 million subscribers. So it's globally one of the largest telcos, right? Indonesia being a huge country, obviously. And did a deal in Singapore, a deal in Australia, a deal in Germany, a deal in Portugal, another deal in Indonesia. Not sure if I mentioned Singapore. And so then between all of those, we got to over 4.5 million downloads. We had really decent retention rates. We made like low mid 7-digit revenue, so millions of dollars of revenue. And that's, I guess, roughly around that point in time, I made the Forbes list. And we did that in about 3-ish years. I had then some, I guess you could say, misalignment with my investors. It's also tough to raise. I have to say, it's also tough to raise funds in ad tech and advertising technology, because it's not the sexiest space anymore right now. Like if you look at VC statistics, venture capital statistics, advertising is somewhere right at the bottom. I mean, basically everybody thinks you're fighting for dollars with Google and Facebook. On top of that, our supply model or business model is to work with telcos to create supply. So we often heard the phrase of you're stuck between two giants. I think we did as a company a very decent job, and I managed to then eventually find a deal with my investors where I exited the company last year and then took a little break.
Congratulations.
I mean, it's not exactly the way I wanted it all to happen, but it's okay. And took a little break, spent more time with my kids. I have 3 young kids who didn't see me all that much during all that time building the company. So then that was nice. I spent a bit more time with my kids, and I was looking around, and I was already in Singapore, by the way. So I had moved here for the previous company. The investors in my previous company had asked me to move here at some stage and made me an offer I couldn't refuse, which moved us all from, I already had 2 kids. My daughter is born here actually, which moved us all from New Zealand here to Singapore. But I decided to stay here because we really like it here. It's very children friendly, and it's also a very happening market for Asia. I think Singapore is a really great hub. I highly recommend it to anybody. Also, if there's any Forbes folks or otherwise, feel free to reach out. And I think I'm a good contact to show you some good spots for dinner. or whatever
Yeah,
else.
a lot of entrepreneurs have been vetting Singapore as a new location to reside. So you're definitely going to have some listeners that might reach out and looking to expand there, open up a new office there. It seems to become more and more popular.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Exactly. And of course, through that journey, I also met a lot of people. And I had one gentleman who didn't invest in my previous business for various reasons. Essentially, his main reason was that he figured our business model is quite complex, and he can see how we can maybe 3x or 5x or best case 10x the business, but he's looking for things that can 100x. And at the time, but he's like, but I really like you and we should stay friends. And I was like, okay, whatever, dude. And turns out he actually did stay in touch, and we kept talking. And funny enough, I keep mentioning alcohol. This must seem terrible, but I met him again about 3-4 months ago at a tequila tasting, just randomly. I mean, we would catch up for coffee once every 2 months or so anyway. He's sort of like a friend / mentor. He's managing partner of one VC here. He was also sold a couple of companies to IBM, was previously a founder of Match.com, you know, the kings of online dating from your parts of the world.
Oh, yes.
And just an incredible guy, you know, and I just randomly saw him at this whiskey tasting. I was telling him that I was almost going to take a role at a telco, like a management level role at a telco, which would have paid very nicely, nice paycheck. I can probably go home at 6 o'clock most days. And when I was telling him about this, he was like, no, Milan, don't do that yet. You gotta come talk to me. I might have something else for you. So then I did that, and we met at like a Starbucks or something. That's where he likes to meet. And and then he showed me this opportunity for IVS, which is essentially a video player company that, like you said, like a B2B YouTube here in Asia, where we work with tier 1 publishers, sort of like so for example, like Compass, Kabanlagi Group, GMA, Philippines Inquirer, so the sort of the large online newspaper sites here in Southeast Asia. We power the online video. So when you go on a website and you see you scroll through and you see a video, we are the player technology behind it. That we host the videos, we transcode them, we stream them, we on the fly adjust the bit rate and the format of the video to stream as fast as possible, regardless what kind of network speed you're on. The network speed here is not the same as in America, and if you're in Jakarta in traffic, it's terrible. So we do our best to try and still deliver good video quality, even with
low bandwidth.
Exactly.
So even if you're in a developing nation with low bandwidth, low data, you're able to process the video properly, so it still streams as effectively.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how does it work if, let's say, I'm Compass or another company, and why would I use your service? What were they currently doing? And then they're like, oh wow, this is actually going to solve a lot of our problems.
Yeah, good question. I mean, I have to say, I have to give the credit for solving this problem to the people before me. So I came in to this company. The founder, ironically, there was a company where the founder was leaving and they were looking for a new CEO. And so I was the founder CEO of my previous company. I just left that and then joined this company.
Perfect timing.
Took over the CEO role. I mean, they did that before I joined, right? So what I'm now focusing on is something slightly different, but nonetheless, I think it's a very good question. I was also very impressed when I joined with what they had managed to build. So building a supply line of over 1 billion page views per month is pretty impressive for any small startup, I think. Small startup. And so basically what the technology really does, it uses natural language processing, so NLP, as well as some machine learning, some actual AI on a personalization level, but primarily the NLP that analyzes the page text on a page. So for example, let's say you load an article page that says Donald Trump impeachment, Senator so-and-so said so-and-so. Our NLP will analyze what are the key keywords. So first one, Donald Trump, second one, impeachment, third one, Senator so-and-so. Maybe there's another keyword. And then we match those against keywords in a video database from the publisher's own videos. Some of these publishers upload, 100 videos a day. So the larger publishers, they publish a lot of, not now during COVID, it's more tricky, I think, to publish a lot of videos. But in the good times, a lot of these large publishers, they produce a lot of content. Some of them may also be broadcasters, so they bring some of their TV content back to their websites. And so what we do is we essentially enable them to just put one JavaScript tag for non-techies, just a bit of code, like 3 lines of code on a page. and it will automatically choose the most relevant video to that page, but also to the individual who's loading the page if there's cookie data. So what that means is that we have very, very high page view to video view conversions. So where historically, if a publisher is using like a YouTube for publishers or a Brightcove or JW player, standard video player, they actually, some of these larger video players like Brightcove or JW player, they also have those features, but they're a charge for model. So you have to pay to use their player. Whereas we offer the entire infrastructure for free, but additionally offer this technology that allows the publisher to massively increase their video views overall on their site, which of course then means that they have a larger monetization opportunity. So
yeah, that's genius, because then you're giving more relevant video content for the editorial that they're providing. So you're having a more relevant content digested by the audience, so they're more likely to click on it and view that page.
Exactly. And it also means that we make the workflow easier for them, because they don't have to manually choose a video. So they can just publish an article and the video automatically gets pulled from their database. Of course, it
auto populates the video based on the words. You find the most popular keyword is Donald Trump impeachment. Now, if someone's looking for those particular terms, or it pops up in their news feed, you're going to have the right video content properly placed for them.
The funny thing is, for big topics like this, as using this as an example, if it was Donald Trump and impeachment, there would probably be hundreds of videos that have those two keywords, right? So we'd really then go down into the tier 3, tier 4, and understand based on the page which is the most relevant, both on historic context, also on subtext of the article, but also on personalization. So if we know that you, Phil, have previously watched one video, we won't show you the same. So it means that you and me might see completely different videos on the same page.
So it keeps track of the audience's behavior. That way, whoever's viewing it there's no redundancy. They're actually getting the video content that they're most attracted to.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the point.
That's perfect. Well, congratulations on the success so far. What would you say, Milan, is the single most important attribute that's gotten you to this level of success? I mean, you were successful with your first company, and then with this company, very successful. What do you think is the personal attribute that you got that got you to where you are today?
So I think it's a good question. It's a tough question. I think it's maybe the fact that I don't feel successful at all. That I don't really feel like I'm where. If I was where I want to be, I just go and play golf and hang out. You know, I think it's the hunger, you know, it's the hunger that's driving me. I've got plans for what I want to do or what I want to achieve, and I don't feel successful. But yeah, so I think the hunger is definitely the number one. But then I'm sure there's other traits. Like I think I'm very lucky to have great parents who instilled great values in me, and which allows me to focus on the right things and not waste too much time with ego or things that are not relevant for what people call success. Right, that might stop you. So I think I've been privileged in a way mentally, that I'm not blocked by a lot of sort of mental blockers that might make success more tricky. Yeah, but I think from a personal trait point of view, I think it's more the fact that I don't feel successful, which keeps driving things forward, right, rather than sort of plateauing and saying,
you have the hunger, the drive. It's like, once I climb Mount Everest, you're like, okay, what's the other mountain peak I want to climb?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to keep going,
moving forward. So, all right, so maybe from the opposite side, what do you think is the biggest lesson you've learned during your journey that maybe you wish you learned a bit sooner?
I mean, no regrets, right? I think you can only move forward. So no regrets on anything. There's only learnings. But one thing I learned with my previous company is, so I had some misalignments with my previous investors, and I don't want to go too deep into it. You know, I actually highly respect them. Some of them are still my mentors. I still hang out and I go and have a drink with them, and you know, I'm still close to some of them, especially the key investors. But I think I kind of misread a little bit their intentions at some stage. Or I kind of figured, you know, I'm the founder CEO, I have my vision, I'm just going to do what I want to do. And they hinted me several times that they think they would do it another way. But they weren't probably very direct, as I'm German, right? And in Germany, we say it how it is. There's no beating around the bush. Yeah, exactly. So yeah. So I mean, what that taught me is keep your ears to the ground, and maybe it really also changed how I behave now. So I think the way in my previous company, I was really leading from the front. I was always in the field. I was spending 60-70% of my time on sales, BD, on probably only 30% on like HR and internal matters, ops and so forth. And now that's really shifted. So now I spend a lot more time on enablement, on enabling my team, especially on the commercial side, making sure that they have everything they need to sell, to review sales process, check in with them. But I'm spending a lot more time with the people, and I'm really listening and learning that not everybody's German, not everybody's going to tell you to your face what they're thinking, and you got to read between the lines. And it's not just investors, right? It's everybody. It's just really understanding the people. So and all the way from the management team to the development team or the PR. The PA, right? Like all of them have their problems and their challenges. And if you manage that really well, I just hired a CTO. It's fantastic. We'll announce it soon. And he had a quote which is culture eats strategy for breakfast, which I thought was fantastic. And I think that's one thing I've learned.
That's a healthy lesson to learn, because sometimes as a high achiever, a CEO, an entrepreneur, where your success was a result of your hard work, your work ethic, your drive, your passion, your intensity. And then you get to a point where you reach this growing pain, where you're at this intersection. It's like, well, to really grow to the next level, I actually need to do less. I need to let go. I need to step back, get out of my own way, and now let the team kind of rise up and take over and empower them to have the drive, the passion, the intensity. Because if not, you're going to inhibit your own excess.
100%. That's it.
And so you did that. And I mean, what a healthy lesson. I would definitely want to see what advice would you give someone that's at that stage right now, where they're like starting to grow to the point where it's no longer due to their direct work ethic or success. It needs to they need to let go, and they need to let the team kind of rise up to take the reins.
I think it's hard. It's a hard one. I mean, especially as an entrepreneur. So, I mean, in retrospect, it's always easier to see the stuff in retrospect, right? So hindsight is so much easier.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
20/20, yeah. But the key thing, look, I think like for me, one thing I noticed is in Poster, it was my baby, right? So so even with product decisions or market focus decisions or fundraising decisions, so I was very much attached to my view of things, and everybody else's view of things was sort of like, yeah, I would consider it if it was logical and it fit into my plans. I'd take it on board, but it was like, this is my baby, right? And probably that creates a lot of blind spots, right? When you're too attached, it creates blind spots, and you actually end up making mistakes because you're not playing chess enough. You end up being a figure on the chessboard. You might be the queen, you might be running in every direction and killing lots of pawns, but you don't have the bird's eye view, right, that you really need. And now the hindsight piece is, now I'm running this company and I sort of dropped in by the investor. I'm naturally approaching it with a bird's eye view because I have no other choice, right? I don't have any context, any historical context, so of course I have to dig in everywhere. But I think it's huge. It's tremendously beneficial to have less attachment. That's the hindsight view. So I mean, if I was giving myself advice like 2 years back, I probably would have said that. I probably would say that. I probably would say try and remove your attachment from the product, from this deal, from trying to change this person's point of view to force your point of view. Try and remove the attachment and spend more time alone, spend more time with your team than in the field, and realize that you can't scale yourself, right? You can only scale processes or structures.
You only have so many hours of yourself in a day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Beyonce only has 24 hours in a day, just like you. So you can only go and do so much. So you had to leverage your team's expertise and empower them. And it's interesting. I think that's such a valuable lesson. It's like you need to learn to keep your ears to the ground and listen to people. And from your investors to your co-founders to your executive team, all the way down to your customers. And if you're not listening, you're not going to adapt to the market. And more importantly, the lesson I think could be boiled down to don't fall in love with your solution, fall in love with the problem, fall in love with solving the problem. And it sounds like that's what you did when you took over the new company, because it wasn't your baby. So you didn't care about the solution as is, how it exists in the current form. You said, well, here's the problem we're trying to solve. So forget about what we did previously or how it exists right now. Let's make sure we're adapting fast enough to stay ahead of the game, to make sure we're actively addressing the problem in its current form. Because the problem might change and adapt and pivot over time. So your solution needs to change, pivot, and adapt over time. But sometimes we get so obsessed with our own idea that we fail to pivot fast enough and adapt and learn.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you said it better than I could.
No, I'm just extrapolating some of those main points that you're making. And you did it because it sounds like you noticed you had a little bit of an advantage, because at first you went through this unique transition where it's perfect timing. You're exiting this company, which was your baby, into a new company where it wasn't your baby. So you were able to come in without having that existing attachment. But what if someone's not that fortunate, right? They might be listening and they're currently in this situation where it is their baby, but they do need to step back. What advice would you give them or yourself in order to do that in the moment? How do you step back? Do you get a mentor, a coach? Do you read a book? What could you do to like remove your ego and fall in love with the problem, not the solution?
Yeah, it's tough. It's a good question. I mean, I think life is a way of sort of teaching you the lessons that you need, right? So I think for me, there was a lesson that I needed. I know other entrepreneurs who don't have that problem. I know other entrepreneurs who probably need to spend more time on the ground, right? Who need to get closer to their actual day-to-day business, right? Who are leading too much from the back. And so I don't think it's like a 100% categorical learning, right? That everybody needs to. It's not categorical that everybody learns. So some people might have the opposite learning. But I think the keeping a bird's eye view and not being too attached to the business, to the ideas, and especially to your own ideas, being open to the other people's ideas, and doing a lot of listening, I think is important. And I mean, reading. You just touched on mentors and reading. So I've always had mentors around me. I've always sought people out who can help me build what I want to build, who have more experience in doing that. Also partly because I never had a business degree. I never did an MBA or went to an Ivy League school or anything, right? So I kind of figured I need some people who can coach me. And so I have always had that, which was really helpful. But there were probably more like one was a telco guy or one was an advertising guy, right? So that they would be able to help me with one subject matter. And of course, there was lots of learnings along the way on people management and P&L management and general sort of business learnings. But this whole like keeping your ears to the ground, if you're a smart guy, you can always justify, post-rationalize your decisions and why that made sense. And that becomes too easy, especially if you're very attached to something.
That's why it's so important to have mentors and coaches that come from a place of love. Like they care about you as an individual and they're looking out for your best interests, but they're willing to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
100%. Yeah. People who are tough enough, right?
I think that's what's amazing about the German culture too, is you're willing to be very direct in some cases. And sometimes that's needed. I can empathize with that. Growing up in Philadelphia, New Jersey area, in the Northeast of the US, it's typically known for being very direct and frank. And in the South of the US, it's not known for being very frank. And sometimes they call it the Southern hospitality. It's a little bit too nice sometimes,
Yes, yes.
in our opinion. And now I live in the South in Tampa, Florida, but most of the people, luckily, are from the Northeast. So I jive with them a little bit better. But I remember my professor, when I first moved down, he was telling me this story. He said he can empathize with me coming from the North because his daughter was in the dorm room and she has this new roommate, and his daughter's from the South and the roommate's from the North. And the daughter is complaining to him saying, I don't know what to do. My roommate is always using my toothpaste, Dad. I don't know what to do. And so he says, just that the next time you go out, ask if she wants any toothpaste. So this girl, every time she would go grocery shopping, she'd say, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you want me to get you any toothpaste? And the roommate's like, nah, I'm okay. No problem. And she kept using her toothpaste. And she's like, Dad, she's not getting it. And it's so funny because I told him, I said, yeah, I wouldn't catch on either. You would need to tell me, hey, stop using my toothpaste. You need to get your own toothpaste.
Yeah.
You need to be direct. You need to tell me. And so it was just funny, that dichotomy of culture of how she is telling you to get your own toothpaste. She's just doing it in a nicer, indirect way.
Or you could put some Tabasco into the toothpaste or something.
Yeah, there you go. So speaking of doing something scrappy, what's something you did that was scrappy to hustle to get to where you are now? I love the entrepreneurial hustles that maybe you couldn't have revealed in the very beginning, even maybe with your previous company or something along your journey that you did that you couldn't have revealed in the beginning, but maybe you can reveal now.
Good question. I mean, I think I'm generally, if you talk to my friends, I think I'm generally a pretty scrappy guy. I used to get into fights and stuff like that when I was young, quite a bit. Still wear the scars of that. But funny enough, I think on a business side, maybe also because I'm German, or because my dad's a scientist, I don't think we never did things like, and especially in app business, we could have bought ourselves reviews. Everybody does that. It's very common that app businesses in the beginning, they go to some like review farm and buy themselves lots of 5-star reviews, for their apps. I don't know. Somehow maybe I'm too idealistic or principled. We never did those kind of things. But I think the way I'm scrappy, I find myself scrappy, is that I don't give up easily at all. So I will, if I want to get to the chief product officer of some giant company, I will just hunt people on LinkedIn and hunt my network until eventually somebody gives me a qualified lateral intro, and then I go sit down for a whiskey and I get my kicks out of that, right? That I'm able to do that. I can get to where I want to get to, and I think the irony is that comes from the real like street smart scrappiness I've had when I was young, right? Where it was more maybe about getting the girl, or getting getting the car that I wanted, and just finding a way, and maybe buying the slightly shitty car and then panel beating it and fixing it myself. But it's still the BMW 5 Series, right, that I wanted, but I got it for 4K instead of 15K or whatever it is. So I think that mentality translated quite well for me, at least, from being the guy who just always goes for what he wants, but potentially sometimes to the point where it's a bit annoying for other people. But then as I kind of grow older and become a little bit more mature emotionally for myself, I feel like that's still maybe a good word for is grit, right? I think they talk about that GRIT. It's important. It's super important to have that hustle in you so where a lot of people say, no, you can't do that, or he won't talk to us, or for me, it's like, no, you can. There will be a way, right? Like, so not accepting no for an answer. I think that's for me what hustle is all about. It's
not the how, it's the why, and you'll figure out the how along the way.
Yeah, there'll be a way.
Once you decide, you just go after it, and you'll find a way along.
And I do that. I mean, I do that now still sometimes with my staff, or even my management team. If people are saying like, "Oh, I think this is not possible," and sometimes I just go and just do it, and then I won't say anything, right? I just want them to see it can be done, and then you can see how it motivates. It changes their approach as well if they
100%. I think that's the difference in the CEO entrepreneurial mindset than an employee mindset. Cause I noticed that as well. I never even question the how. It's if I want to get it done, I'm going to find a way to get it done no matter what.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk actually talks about this in his biography here by Ashley
Right.
Vance, phenomenal book, by the way, but he talks about SpaceX and he's like, listen, these are the top engineers in the world at NASA. I mean, some of the smartest people in the world. They have sent people to the moon, blah, blah, blah. And he went in there and he found that the biggest problem with space exploration is they don't have relaunchable rockets. And the reason that's the biggest issue is because it's so expensive to build a rocket, and you build it and then you send it up once and all that money is gone. And so he set out to build a relaunchable rocket, as most people know. But when he was pitching this idea to NASA and the government and all the head of the space exploration societies around the world, including Russia, et cetera, they all said it's absolutely impossible. Physics doesn't even allow it. And not only did they say that it was impossible, but when he vetted their technology, he said, some of these shuttles are using technology from the 1960s. They're so antiquated. And he's like, these are the people I looked up to. And he said how demoralizing it was because these are the people that I admired. These are the people that as a child I grew up idolizing. And now they're telling me things that I know are possible in my mind, and they're telling me it's impossible. So not only
also as an entrepreneur, right? Like there's this thing, like I have that. If people tell you that's not possible, that's like this little man in my head, like immediately is like, boom, let's prove them wrong. Right? Yeah. That's what I showed him. Why?
And he not only proved them wrong, he did it for a budget that was way less, exorbitantly less than what they were spending. So kudos to him. And it just shows you that sometimes you have to be the one to set the precedent.
And then ideally, I mean, what I'm learning over time is you try and make less noise about it. You just do it, and then let people just watch, and then that's the trick usually.
They get to, hey, listen, you witness it along the way. I mean, the same thing happened with Walt Disney when after he passed away, his brother, there's a famous story of his brother being interviewed. He didn't get to see the opening. I think it was Magic Kingdom or Tomorrowland, the new feature at Disney World in Orlando, Florida. And someone's interviewing his brother and they're like, oh, isn't it such a shame? They were trying to, arouse his emotions just for the media. And they kind of being a jerk about it. And they were like, oh, isn't this a shame that your brother couldn't be here to witness this because he had just passed away?
Right.
And his brother goes, the only reason that anyone here can see this is because my brother saw it first. And I was like, because he had have the vision and the imagination for any of us to even witness that possibility. And so kudos to you and your entrepreneurial mindset to build things that might not have existed ever before. And so I commend all the entrepreneurs listening that are setting that new precedent and breaking through and disrupting and creating the future that we all want to live in.
100%. Yeah.
So Milan, let's transition now into something I like to call the under 30 seconds round. Okay. I'm going to fire off some questions and just answer with the first thing that comes to mind. You ready?
30 seconds per question or 30 seconds in total?
It's just called the under 30 seconds round to play off the Forbes 30 under 30. But listen, if you go over 30 seconds, I will shoot you in the foot for that.
Okay.
All right. Number one, what is the book you've gifted more often than any other book and why?
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Because it's kind of it's maybe a bit basic, talking about like entrepreneurial books, and you have an Elon Musk book over there. But why? Because I think I think most people's biggest problems are their values, is their ego, how they approach things, and I think he's got a good approach to changing that.
Great one. What's one of the best investments and one of the worst investments you've ever made? And why?
Best investment I've ever made was building a house in New Zealand. So I bought the land and built a house from scratch, and it almost tripled in value over a course of 5 years. Worst investment I ever made. It's good that nothing's coming to mind. My shoe collection. I've got like 50 pair of Adidas and I'm not using any of them now. I'm just stuck at home in this COVID lockup.
There you go. 50 pairs of Adidas. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty bad investment. And if you have to move a lot, it's even worse. What's the most impactful thing you do in your morning routine and the most impactful thing you do in your evening routine?
Morning yoga. I try to do yoga as much as possible, which really is amazing. Just for, especially if you're not getting out now in the whole lockup situation, has been amazing for me. I've been doing yoga 3-4 times a week, or going for a bike ride otherwise. So just doing sport, doing exercise in the morning. In the evening, stopping to work at some stage and cuddling with my fiance or having a glass of whiskey or both at the same time. Yeah.
There you go. And pretend you won the Peter Thiel Fellowship and you were going to get money to start a business rather than go to college. What's the very first thing you do to start your new business?
Figure out, so putting myself back in time, figure out what to do and who to do it with.
Building the team. There you go. Looking for a partner, co-founder. Last question. What's something you never knew you needed?
Time for myself.
Good answer. Well, Milan, thank you so much for being here today. Before you go, what's the next big goal, milestone, or bucket list item you want to achieve?
I have a whole bunch of financial targets in my company, which are pretty much aligned with my personal goals right now. Yeah, I'd like to hit a certain threshold, not so much in valuation because I think that's a fluffy number, but in terms of top line and net revenue for my company. I won't disclose the exact numbers, but I have a target where I want to get to.
Next time we visit you or revisit this conversation, we'll check in and see how you're doing along the progress. Where do listeners go to connect with you directly? And where, if listeners want to get involved with your company or maybe want to use your service, where do they go for that?
You can just email me I pretty much answer to all emails, unless they're completely irrelevant or very rude. Basically at milan@ivs.tv, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm generally fairly responsive. Even though I get a lot of emails, but I do make a point of answering them.
And ivs.tv is where they'll go for connecting with your company. Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you. Go connect with Milan. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. This is Milan with iVideoSmart, called IVS, and they are the YouTube for business. We learned so much today. Maybe to visit Singapore and New Zealand, because it sounds like an attractive place to go, how to hustle, how to reflect and make sure you are not sold on your own idea too much to the point of obsession. Sometimes you need to adapt to the problem, and we learned how to do that. Milan, thank you so much for being here today. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Phil. Appreciate it.
I hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Have an amazing day.
Totally. See you soon, man.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Who do you think would benefit from hearing it? You can make an impact on their life by sharing it now. Before you go, I encourage you to tell us your favorite part of the episode in the review section. Now it's time to level up.